Donald Trump is not a student of history. He is easily the stupidest president we've ever had, and it's abundantly clear whenever he talks about the past, which he doesn't care about, except in very few instances in which he can rewrite it, which is exactly what this administration is trying to do right now. They started off by pardoning 1,500 cop-beating insurrectionists. Donald Trump recently had his name removed from a Smithsonian exhibit on impeachments, but his latest action might be the most devastating yet in his attempt to rewrite the past failures of his administration, the past crimes of his administration. And he's doing so with a shocking firing in the FBI that has already backfired on him and exposed his criminality. We're going to get into it all, but before we do, if I could quickly ask you to leave a like on this video, and if you haven't already and you enjoy our channel, to hit that subscribe button because it goes a long way in supporting our work. Now, before we can get into what is happening right now at the FBI, I want to start with another breakdown of how Trump is attempting in real time to rewrite history and another cover-up that Lawrence O'Donnell broke down right here.
Well, the dinner meeting scheduled for Vice President's residence last night about the Epstein situation didn't happen at the Vice President's residence thanks to a leak from inside the Trump White House, the Trump administration, that indicated Vice President Vance planned a dinner meeting at his residence last night with White House Chief of Staff Susie Wiles, the Trump FBI director, the Trump Attorney General, and the Trump Deputy Attorney General, who was Donald Trump's personal criminal defense lawyer, Todd Blanche, who is the only criminal defense lawyer in history to represent a president of the United States in a trial where that person was convicted of crimes by a jury of his peers. NBC News is reporting that no gathering occurred last night at the Vice President's residence, which was the worst possible choice of venue for such a meeting because it is so easy for the press to just stake out the driveway there to monitor the entrance of the Vice President's residence to see who's coming to dinner. NBC News is reporting that a group did meet to discuss the Epstein situation at the White House last night, which is the way that meeting should have been planned in the first place. But it's important to note that even then, even when they kept it indoors at the White House with no one able to watch who was coming and going, someone, at least one person or more, inside the Trump White House, inside the Trump administration, is leaking about these meetings, about the scheduling of these meetings, and about them actually happening. Someone in there working for Donald Trump wants news organizations to know that the Trump White House and Trump cabinet members are desperately trying to figure out how to rewrite history to erase Donald Trump's friendship with Jeffrey Epstein, who said before he died in prison, "I was Donald's closest friend for 10 years.
There could not be a more perfect example of Donald Trump in real time trying to change a narrative than what is happening with Ghislaine Maxwell. Testimony we expect to see be in complete capitulation to Donald Trump, praising him. So, oh, Mr. Trump never did anything wrong. What a great guy. Him and Epstein, they weren't even friends. Donald Trump was just around him to tell him off. Bullshit. We know it's not true, but it is coming because Donald Trump wants to rewrite history. Not just of his past friendships, but his past administration. And that is what's happening with a shock firing at the FBI, which is already blown up in Donald Trump's face. Senior agent who helped oversee FBI's response to January 6 is fired. The Trump-appointed leaders of the FBI deepened their purge of employees this week, forcing out senior agents, including the former acting head of the Bureau and another top official whose ascent angered Trump supporters, according to people familiar with the matter. Brian Driscoll, who previously served as the acting director in the early days of the Trump administration, was among those being forced out and told to leave by Friday, according to people who spoke on the condition of anonymity to describe personnel decisions that have not yet been made public. Stephen Jensen, the head of the FBI's Washington field office, was also ousted this week. These people said Mr. Jensen has been a target of conservatives because in overseeing the Bureau's domestic terrorism operations section at the time, he played a key role in responding to the January 6, 2021 attack on the Capitol. Mr. Driscoll, a charismatic FBI veteran with extensive experience in domestic and international investigations, became an unlikely champion of the Bureau after being accidentally catapulted through an administration foul-up to the director's chair on Inauguration Day. He resisted demands to turn over the names of FBI agents who had worked on the investigation into the Capitol attack, fighting off what was seen as a possible purge. Those actions earned him folk hero status among the rank and file and the enmity of President Donald Trump's former enforcer at the Justice Department, Emil Bove, which ultimately sealed his fate. His continued reluctance to accede to requests contributed to his dismissal, according to people familiar with the decision. The removals are likely to deal another blow to the morale of the agency, which has faced intense scrutiny after conducting investigations that Trump supporters have denounced. Mr. Jensen's ouster, in particular, is an embarrassing chapter in Kash Patel's tenure as director, given that he had promoted Mr. Jensen and defended his decision on national television. And now, a group of former national security and FBI officials are issuing a warning about ongoing purges inside the FBI. The aim, it seems, is to transform the FBI from a respected, constitutionally grounded investigative service into a personal enforcement arm of a political figure. We have seen these dynamics abroad, leaders who demand loyalty from security services, not to the law, but to themselves. These regimes do not end well. We are now seeing FBI agents inside and ousted from the Bureau coming out against Donald Trump, because this is not just about protecting his own political interests as it relates to covering up his relationship with Epstein or making sure people forget about January 6th, which we are not going to. It is also about attacking his political opponents, the very thing Trump said was happening to him. And where we're seeing it worst is those Democratic lawmakers fleeing Texas. And I spoke to a Democratic congressman in Greg Kazar about all of that in an interview I hope you check out to the end. Congressman, I am so glad that we are able to talk right now under very unfortunate circumstances, but you have been maybe louder than any other voice in Congress right now, fighting back against this administration's really just authoritarian takeover of your state. Right now, we are seeing FBI agents being instructed that they might have to go after Democrats across the country from Texas to bring them back to your state so Republicans can go forth with this gerrymander. Can you explain, like, is there any context? Is there any precedent for this? What is happening?
This is the kind of thing that you see in totalitarian and authoritarian nations around the world. And people flee those nations to come to the United States. But now folks like Governor Greg Abbott and Donald Trump are trying to be wannabe dictators here. They are trying to direct federal law enforcement to go arrest Democrats because they disagree with them. And because those Democrats are trying to defend democracy as we know it. At the exact same time, Governor Abbott is asking judges here in Texas to unilaterally remove basically all of the Democratic legislators out of office and then allow Greg Abbott to replace those folks with people of his own choice. So just in summary here, Donald Trump wants to do radical redistricting in Texas and then across the nation so that he can pick your member of Congress instead of you. Then if somebody gets in his way, they're threatening to send the FBI after those elected officials. And then governors like Governor Abbott are threatening to say that he wants to get rid of elected officials you already voted for and replace them with people he picked. It makes you say, like, what kind of country are we in? But this is America right now, and it can get so much worse if we don't stop it in its tracks here in Texas.
Yeah, that is the scary thing, that it can get so much worse, that Donald Trump isn't stopping here. He's looking across the country to pick up, I shouldn't say pick up, but to steal seats. That's what's happening right now. It's good to know they understand how unpopular they are. It's a little upsetting that their strategy isn't, maybe we should stop stealing people's healthcare. Instead, they're just going to steal their congressional districts. But right now, we just saw J.D. Vance literally behind a black curtain meeting with the governor of Indiana, discussing more redistricting plans. Obviously, we've heard from Democratic governors. I just spoke with Governor Newsom. We heard Governor Pritzker, Governor Hochul saying that they are willing to push back. They are willing to get into this fight. But a lot of it, I feel like, or I've heard, seems kind of contingent upon this actually happening in Texas. I don't think we should be waiting. Do you think Democratic governors should just go forward right now or see how things play out in your state?
Democrats need to be ready to fight fire with fire. I think for too long, Democrats have played Boy Scout and Girl Scout while Republicans ruthlessly take us down the path towards authoritarianism. We can't do that anymore. That just is not right. Like you laid out earlier, Trump and JD Vance don't have a plan for winning the upcoming midterm elections.
Yeah.
They have a plan for trying to rig those elections. Just like Donald Trump famously around January 6th called the Georgia governor and said, find me 11,000 more votes. Now he's called the Texas governor and said, give me 5 seats. Calling the Florida governor saying, give me 3 seats. Calling the Indiana governor and saying, give me more seats. We can't just let that happen. And I bet the best way for Democrats to fight back is to say, you know what, we are going to start actually fighting back, not just folding, not just defending, the institutions as they exist, but start inspiring people in huge numbers, start threatening to redistrict out Republican members of Congress in blue states, and then build a new kind of Democratic Party that isn't beholden to corporate PAC money, that doesn't do corporate stock, big time stock trading as members of Congress anymore. Be willing to break from the Democratic Party of the past, be a new inspirational kind of Democratic Party that's also willing to be more bare knuckled with people that want to steal our elections.
Where else in the current context of this administration do you see a new generation of Democrats fighting back against Trump's corruption?
Let's call it for what it is. Donald Trump is the most corrupt president in American history. Donald Trump thinks that he's entitled to a $400 million bribe in the form of a plane from a foreign government. Donald Trump says he's entitled to billions of dollars in payouts and kickbacks from crypto deals all the way through payouts from companies like Amazon. And now he thinks he's entitled to just controlling the Congress and gerrymandering it however he wants. If we want to beat back the most entitled and corrupt administration in American history, then I think Democrats need to just draw a very strong contrast with that. We have to become truly the anti-billionaire, anti-corruption party. I know that in the past, we've had Democratic leadership that says we've got to protect the ability of members of Congress to trade stocks. We can't do that anymore. We have to be very clear that Democrats should be anti-stock trading by members of Congress of both parties. Democrats should be against allowing billionaires with their own conflicts of interest to serve in our administrations. We should not allow an Elon Musk to serve in a Republican administration, but we shouldn't allow Wall Street bankers that might consider themselves Democrats. They shouldn't be allowed to serve in future Democratic administrations. We've got to break with the past. And I think we also need to break with these, the idea that big corporate super PACs are going to save us. I'm really pushing for part of the new Democratic platform to include banning super PACs, ending Citizens United, ending corporate money in our politics and getting rid of these super PACs, because I think that if we want to inspire that next generation of voters, they've got to see that Democrats are willing to call out big money on the Republican side, but that we're also willing to pass the kinds of laws that get big money out of the Democratic Party as well.
Yeah, and at the same time, as we try to figure out and rebrand how people view the Democratic Party, which has just been so important as we look kind of for our guiding light there, I feel like we're not giving enough attention to rebranding and changing how people view conservatives. When you ask someone, who doesn't really pay attention to politics that much, like, well, what do you think a conservative is? What do you think a Republican voter looks like? They usually offer up, like, I don't know, like maybe they're pro-business, they want your taxes to be lower. I don't know what element of the current administration fits into that. When you have tariffs, raising taxes on working people, this is a bad jobs report after bad jobs report, except the next one coming will be like 20 million jobs for Donald Trump with his skewed numbers. Like, how do you think we take a guy like JD Vance or a guy like Ted Cruz, who wants to inflict their lifestyle upon you, not actually live it themselves, and then when the going gets tough, like Ted Cruz just runs away. When disasters break out in your state, Republicans don't respond. How do we reshape the way that people view Republicans in this moment right now when they're just so damn weak and ineffective?
It's so important to show folks that vote Republican that their elected officials are just fakers.
Yeah.
At the end of the day, I believe that the vast majority of voters in Texas would support folks that they authentically think are going to work for them, work for working class people. In some of these rural counties, for example, in Texas, that right now Donald Trump wins 80-20. Not very long ago, Democrats would win those areas overwhelmingly.
Mhm.
And in part, it's because they remember the Democratic Party that first created Social Security right after the Great Depression, the Democratic Party that created Medicare and Medicaid in the 1960s. And so I think we have to get to a moment where we say, look, the Ted Cruzes of the world only care about themselves.
Yeah.
And we have to show that very clearly, but then have an authentic alternative so that it doesn't seem like we're all the same, because the Ted Cruzes of the world do not actually represent Texas. They just represent the big money interests behind them. And we've got to expose them for the fakers and the cowards that they are. I mean, somebody like Greg Abbott, who should be taking care of flood victims right now and doing flood relief, is just acting as Donald Trump's water boy. He's turning an entire special session that could have been about rebuilding the flood-ravaged hill country into a special session about shielding Trump from corruption. And we've got to be unafraid to go all in on that.
No, I completely agree. And it's the way that Republicans, and I recently spoke to Beto O'Rourke about this, kind of yield and use power like with a vengeance, right? They're ruthless in the way that they yield and cultivate their power. I don't see us doing that at any real level. I see a lot of, at least in Congress, a lot of like strongly worded letters. What is the way that we change that narrative around Democrats being perceived as kind of feckless? And what does a Democratic majority in Congress do to change the way that we're perceived and actually make big structural change that people can then get on board with?
Look, when we have the next Democratic majority, we have to be able to deliver in really big ways for the American people in a way that everybody can understand. Because at the end of the day, if you look at the last Democratic majority, which did great things, but it did things like in the Inflation Reduction Act of not negotiating down all prescription drug prices, but negotiating down a few of them over a long time. Some of them aren't even being negotiated down for years after President Biden already left office. I mean, that doesn't make sense to folks, and it does not break through the massive right-wing propaganda machine. Instead, I think we need simple concepts that we can deliver on immediately, like make Jeff Bezos and Elon Musk pay the same tax rate into Social Security as you, me, firefighters, and teachers do. And in one day, if you have them do that, in one day, you would pull every senior in this country out of poverty, protect Social Security for generations to come, and greatly expand Social Security and put money in young people's pockets who oftentimes have to send their money to support their parents because Social Security just isn't enough. You could do that quickly, and that's the kind of immediate use of power that we need to use. That you could call that progressive, or you could call it something else. I don't care. It's just about delivering in a way that makes sense to everybody, instead of thinking, oh, our child care program, we're going to have vouchers that run through states if you qualify at a certain income. People just say, screw that. I can't even understand that. We've got to be able to deliver in big ways to break through the propaganda.
And I think one of those things that we can deliver, and you brought it up twice, so I wanted to end on it because I think it's so important, is one of the least political but most important issues to our politics is congressional stock trading. Because if that's allowed to happen, how can you trust anything that's happening in Washington, right? But at this time that we are trying to make sure that this is the anti-corruption mantle we're taking up, this can be viewed as a bipartisan issue. And I'm glad if we can get some Republican support to get it passed. But I think this is an issue overwhelmingly supported by Democrats. So how do we make sure that we win this issue? I don't really want to be sharing the credit here with Republicans. How do we make sure that when this happens, we are the ones taking credit. We are the ones that people associate. The Democratic Party is what you think about when you're fighting back against corporate influence in our politics, fighting back against stock trading. I know that we're calling it like the Nancy Pelosi Act, or that's what, like, Josh Hawley wanted to draw it up as. But how do we change that narrative and make sure we are pretty ruthless in taking all the credit on this and really loving that win? Trump always brings out the big ass marker to sign whatever he does. What's our version of that with fighting back against corruption?
Yeah, I mean, first we have to be completely willing to call Josh Hawley being full of shit out.
Yes.
I mean, at the end of the day, Josh Hawley said he was against Medicaid cuts because he wanted to be a working class populist, but then he voted for the Medicaid cuts. Then he filed a bill to undo it. I mean, to me, that's even worse, right? Is that he's saying that he knew it was wrong, he voted for it, and now he's trying to act like he's changed his mind. I mean, give me a break. At the same time, yeah, sure, Republicans, any that vote for banning congressional stock trading, we should gladly allow them to do it, allow them to vote the right way, but we should get Democrats unanimously voting to ban stock trading by the president, the vice president, and the Congress. Have every single Democrat vote for it, even if not all Democrats previously have been for it. We've got to get everybody to vote for it. That way, if there's some token Republican votes that come along, that's fine for them to vote that way, good for them, but we can't let them claim the issue if we get to a unanimous vote in our party. So I think we need to get to that unanimity on the Democratic side.
Yeah, I completely agree. It's something I've been talking about so much lately. We have to qualify every statement that we make. Oh, well, there is waste and fraud in the government, but Doge isn't doing it correctly. It's a ridiculous waste of time. The same.
Yeah, Doge is bad.
Doge
Elon Musk is bad.
Just say they're bad. It's the same thing with anything that we pass that we're so proud to bring in Republican support on. It's like, yeah, sure, like bipartisanship is important, but when you hail the Republican vote that comes along on your bill, it's like you're giving them credit or saying that their ideas are inherently important. They're just not. I'm glad that we're fighting back against that narrative. I'm glad you've been so loud in this fight back against what Donald Trump and Greg Abbott are doing in Texas. And I always appreciate you taking the time to speak with me.
Thanks for having me on, Jack.